what I like to do on the show, and that is inspire, enlighten, and empower you to become your best self. Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we are fired up about a book that I want to share with you. The author's name is Ken Kelly. The book is Aaron's Angels. Jesus Christ gave his disciple John a vision of our Lord's second coming while John was a prisoner on the island of Patmos around 95 AD. This trilogy is a fiction. It's about the vision, about what the vision could look like if it were played out in the 21st century. And I think that that is pretty exciting. Let me tell you a little bit more about Ken. Since being saved at the age of 9 years old, Ken has used whatever environment the Lord has placed him in as an opportunity to spread God's word. Ken was born and raised in Spokane, Washington, where he attended school and at 16 met his future bride, Judy. They have been together for over 50 years and have raised 3 sons. After graduating from Eastern Washington University, Ken taught high school biology and English and coaches athletics. He then moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, where he pursued a career in medical sales and marketing. In 1982, Ken co-founded and named ImmuneCore Inc., located in Norcross, Georgia. This company has grown to be the top blood bank company in the world. After retiring, Ken started a digital marketing company with his wife and son Ryan and another son Brandon, and they joined the agency about a year later. Ken has served as a youth director, elder, and Bible teacher throughout his adult life, and he has so much more that he can share with us today. So without any further ado, let's bring Ken into the conversation. Good morning, Ken. How are you? Thank you so much for being on Daily.
Good morning, Dr. Angela, and thank you so much. What a pleasure to get to speak with you.
Thank you so much. Well, to start, can you tell me a little bit more about not only your foundation, but about all that you've done? It's so interesting. I don't think I've talked to anyone who has ever co-founded a blood bank. Can you tell us not only about that, but again about your foundation and just your background as a Christian and how that has gotten you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you said, it started. I grew up in Spokane, Washington, and it's kind of interesting. When I was about 4 years old, I had an ongoing temperature of over 104 for over a week, and my mother, she took me to the hospital. After a few days, they actually told her that she needed to contact her family because they didn't think I was going to walk out of there.
Right.
Well, my mother grew up going to church as a little girl, but she was not an very active adult Christian. Well, not active at all. But she had learned things as a child. So she went to a local church and went to the pastor, and she told the pastor that if he and the elders would come and pray over me and lay hands on me, she promised that she would make sure that I was at church every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they actually did go, and they prayed, and I walked out of the hospital actually the next day.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
My mom, she kept her promise. She would drop me off at church, and then she would go somewhere and have coffee. Unfortunately, it was many years later until I and my wife actually led her and my dad to the Lord.
Wow.
But anyway, I was about 9 when I accepted the Lord, and I always had a calling to serve. I was always involved in youth group, church, community programs.
Mm-hmm.
And as I grew, as you said, I met the love of my life, and I married her at 18. And after graduating from the university, I taught high school biology and English, coached football, wrestling. And it's funny, two of my fondest memories when I had my English class, one of the things I taught was how to do plays. And the play we did was Jesus Christ Superstar.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know the play, it ends with Christ on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wouldn't have that. So I, at the conclusion of the play, I read on in Scripture to say what actually happened. I wanted the kids to know how it really ends. Well, I got a lot of heat from the other teachers for being too religious, but I didn't care. Anyway, another thing that meant a lot to me at that time, as I think about it, I founded a program called Little Brothers, where I took each of my football players and they adopted a little boy in the community who didn't have a father at home. And we did a advertisement. We did all the stuff that you do to really promote the program. And each of my football players took their adopted child, and they would go fishing and all kinds of things. Anyway, that particular project was copied by several other cities within the northwestern states, and I actually received a plaque from the governor of Washington for my community service.
Oh, wow.
And then after a few years, my wife and I, as mentioned earlier, moved to Northern California. And I did teach lab at the University of San Francisco for a while as I began my career as a medical diagnostic sales and marketing person. And you mentioned I founded a company called Immucor Inc. And because we had done so much work in blood testing, we developed a whole new way of cross-matching and typing blood, and then we invented the instruments to automate it. The beauty of it is it was just amazing how God opened up all these ministries to me as I traveled all over the U.S. Actually have over 2 million miles just on United Airlines. But in that period, God would always have me sit next to somebody who needed counseling or someone I could just talk to. A few times I prayed with. But also I taught Sunday school and life groups. I was a youth director one time, and I preached, and I've served as an elder over those years. So that kind of a little bit of my Christian background.
I think that there is a particular thing in your past that has contributed the most to creating your desire to write novels? Or do you think it's just everything, it's kind of a cumulative effect?
Well, there's several things. It's really funny. When I was in the third grade, I had a teacher, Mrs. McGuire. And sometimes I didn't like her very much because she was really hard and very demanding. But, one day she told me I had a great imagination and she loved how I wrote things. And I thought, she likes me. Mrs. McGuire actually likes me. She really inspired me.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I enjoyed writing papers, especially if I could be creative. And in college, I wanted a minor in English so I could learn creative writing. I've always been an avid reader, especially the years that I traveled in my job. I would read all sorts of books, self-help books, mystery novels, history books, science articles, but I loved reading and studying the Bible the most. And so I just got inspired that I needed to create.
So the next question for you is how did you come up with the idea of Aaron's Angels? And is this a standalone book, or do you have plans on doing any books like this in the future?
Well, actually, it's interesting you ask. It's trilogy. The first book is Aaron's Angels. The second book is The Rise of Abaddon. I'll tell you a little bit about later. And the third book is Last Call. And the books have all been written. The second book is currently completing the editing, and the third book is ready for editing.
Mhm.
But a little bit of history. In 1987, I was in Reno, Nevada. I wasn't there to gamble, but I was there to work. I was calling on the area hospitals. And my company that I worked for, as I had mentioned earlier, had developed some very exciting techniques. And so I was excited about talking to the area hospitals. But in my free time, I was preparing material to teach my high school Sunday school class, where the students had asked me to teach on Revelation. Well, even though I'd been a Christian for many years, I really had never studied Revelation. So I went out and I purchased several commentaries on Revelation and was reading them through and writing notes. And I presented the first 5 chapters to the students, and I was preparing ahead of schedule to teach the second half of the 7-year tribulation period. And I was going to teach that the second half was a nuclear war brought on by man. That night, I had a vision, and I heard God's voice, and he let me know that I was about to teach incorrectly. He didn't go on and on. It wasn't much sentence. It was just a few words. But that vision is incorporated actually in my trilogy, in Aaron's Angels, so that the reader can read about it. But after my vision, every time I had a question about Revelation passage, God would simply lead me to its explanation in Daniel or Jeremiah, Malachi, Matthew, Luke, whatever. It's interesting that almost every book in the Bible has passages in it that points to Christ's first or second coming. And it was so inspiring. So I started to teach the book of Revelation to adults. One reason that Revelation is so often avoided is that it's confusing and people just really don't understand, well, when do these things really happen and what really happens? So I developed a actual timeline that I printed out, and it's spread out about 10 feet, but it's a summary of everything that is going to happen. So when writing, always, when you write an article, you do an introduction that gives an overview. Then you do the body that kind of says the introduction, and then you have the end, which repeats everything you've said. So unlike other books in the Bible, Revelation is presented in that manner. For example, the trumpets that are blown in the first half of tribulation, they're all blown in the first 3.5 years except one. It isn't blown until Christ's return just before Armageddon. So in developing the timeline and putting all the occurrences in order from beginning to end, I was able to understand better and teach better everything that was happening, and it started to become more clear.
Right.
And then on September 11th, 2001, the infamous day, I arrived at San Francisco Airport to find that it was closed. In fact, it was being evacuated because the United States was under attack. Well, while waiting for a bus...
Well, before you tell us that story, because I want everyone to hear that, it's time for us to go to break. Can you remind everyone where they can get a copy of your book and how they can follow you online?
Yes, you can. My book is available. Aaron's Angels, and you can order the book from my website at www.klkministries.com. Or you can go to Amazon.com and just type in author Ken Kelly. Also, I have a Facebook presence as well as Instagram.
Alrighty, listeners, you know where to go. We'll be back right after
this. Smell Good Spa for the women who are making a conscientious change in their personal care products. Specializing in signature fragrance oils, hand-dipped incense, and wholesome bath and body, and personal care products. Smell Good Spa. Use code HELLO25 for 25% off your order. Live good, feel good, smell good wholesomely. SmellGoodSpa.com.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know, which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative? I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Discovery. No, just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer? Get us to open up? Even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is author Ken Kelly, and we're talking about his newest book, Aaron's Angels. Now, before we went to break, Ken, you were saying that it is 9/11, and you're at the airport, and things were a little different. Continue with your story.
Just a little different. It is the infamous day, and while I was standing around waiting for a bus to return me back home, started to develop an idea for a fiction book about Revelation. I guess that I thought that the country could be under attack, and maybe I realized that the Lord's return might be on the horizon. I don't know. But I had a small handheld recorder, and I came up with 4 main characters and started thinking about it. And then following that, along with the rest of the country, I watched the trade centers crumble to the ground. But then I began to think how disciple John on the island of Patmos on AD 95 would have described these centers' demise back at that time. He had to describe the vision based only on his limited environment that he lived in during his lifetime. Buildings were no more than 1 or 2 stories high. Motor travel was foot and donkey. Only birds and insects flew. How would he describe something? Maybe 9/11 in his terms might have been like 2 towers reaching heaven, and they were devoured by 2 large birds that shone like the sun. The towers crumbled and were swallowed up by hell, and the smoke from hell rose up to destroy mankind. Well, we know what really happened. So I started to read Revelation with a whole new perspective. If John was looking at events in the 21st century, then what was he really describing? A bunch of monsters? Or can all those things he described be real that we see today? So I decided that my fiction would be about Revelation playing out in the 21st century and how my 4 characters would live through the events. And actually, my first original plan was for 1 book, but it did turn into 3.
Because there's so much good stuff in Revelation, I could see how you would have to give yourself more time to, to really go over everything. Now, my question for you now is, how long did it take for you to work on the project? Did you find that you were working just on book number 1, or did you just decide, I'm just going to write it all, and then we'll divvy it up as it needs to be and turn it into book 1, 2, and 3?
It all started, and I was going to put it all together basically as 1 long book. But as I wrote the book, it got longer and longer, the more I studied and investigated and did all the stuff I had to do, it just became clear that I had to break it up into 3 parts.
Right.
But I started the book in 1987. I did start the book. That's when I got the calling. But in 2001, at 9/11 is when I started writing, or started coming up with the concepts. But I really didn't start writing until 2007. So it's been about an 11-year project.
What was the best part about writing your book? Like, was there any particular chapter that you really kind of fancied more than another, or was book 2 a little bit more fun to write than book 1? Anything in particular like that?
Yeah, well, I enjoyed 2 things really a lot about doing the books overall. That was researching. I loved looking up the Jewish wedding and all the symbolisms, the temple and all the symbolisms in the temple, especially the point of Christ. Military rank, ships, submarines, types of helicopters, militaries of other countries, etc. And I really enjoyed living through each of the characters that I developed, and what life threw at them and how they got through it. And they're actually part of me right now. In fact, each of the book has probably 3 really moving chapters, and just to see how my characters got through that it was almost like I knew them personally, and I was watching their stories just unfold. I don't know if you can understand that, but it was more like I was watching them evolve instead of just making it up. It was very enjoyable. It was a lot of fun.
I can imagine. Well, I have to ask the flip side of the coin, and that is, was there a hard part about writing a particular portion of the book, or was there a part that you maybe wrestled with, like, should I include this or shouldn't I, or should I spend more time on this particular part because people may not be as familiar, or perhaps they are familiar, so I really need to address it? Were there any moments like that when writing?
Yeah, first of all, probably the hardest part of doing the work is the time and being disciplined. But it was fun doing the draft of the book. But there's rewrites after rewrites after rewrites, and that gets a bit daunting. Then came the editing, and I have to say that although I was an English teacher, I don't have the command of proper written grammar that I really need. So I had to find a good editor, and I ended up with a really good editor who actually edited for Reader's Digest. And she was amazing, and she really helped me do formatting and conversational writing and set it all up. But unfortunately, she had family issues and had to stop editing. Then I had a second editor, and, well, she was a waste of time and money. And that was really frustrating. The third, I'm sorry?
I was saying I can imagine when you're saying that was a waste of time and energy and all money and all of that. It's like, yeah, that can be quite frustrating as an author when that happens.
Yeah, it really does. When they send back work that's just not good, it's so disappointing. But I did go out and find what they call a line editor. And what she did is basically take an axe and started chopping out unnecessary scenes, whole character chapters. And she would say, "Oh, Ken, this is really a good chapter, but do you really need it in there? Is it really necessary to the book?" And I was like, "Oh, but I loved writing that." But the reality is she was absolutely right, and she was great, but grammar, again, wasn't her strength. So, but I do have a current editor that is a grammar guru. You ask her why you put a comma there or a colon or whatever, she comes out with all these rules, so I just leave all that to her. But it's just you write a chapter and you love the chapter, and the hardest part is saying is it good for the whole book, for the teaching, where you want to get everyone to understand Revelation, but through a fun way, through a fiction way.
Mm-hmm. Now, in your book, Aaron's Angels, can you tell us a little bit more about who the main characters are, or a little bit about their personalities?
Yeah, these as I say, these have become friends of mine. But the first is probably Cindy, and I have a friend who she attended several of my Bible studies, and I just love her personality, her strength, her leadership abilities. I just she's what I want my granddaughters to become, personality-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Strong in the ability to lead and to achieve. She was a pharmacist, a wife, and a mother. And my character's personality is really patterned after her. Cindy is, in the book, the character. She's the leader and kind of coordinator of the four main characters that has coined the A-Team, which I'll hopefully get to explain a little bit more later. But she also looks to help the disadvantaged, and she loves to talk politics. She has a very soft side to her, and she can swing from being a little girl in need of help to a big sister encouraging for friends and telling them what they need to do. She's determined, and she does get her friends in some difficult situations. She's a cheerleader, loves political debates, and loves hanging with her best friends, Chris, James, and Aaron. And that brings us to our second character, Chris. As a teenager, he's kind of headstrong, very rebellious, member of a group. His parents are very active Christians, and of course they become very concerned for their son. But Chris evolves into something really special. And then the third character is James. Now, he's the son of a wounded and disabled war hero who actually is wins several medals. His dad did, and he just worships him. And he wants to emulate him, but he does blame God for his father's and his lot in life because the mother leaves when the father comes back from war as an amputee. But James is a natural athlete and a leader, and his goal is to become a general in the army. And he's very private, and he's very man of very few words. And then the fourth one is Aaron. His Jewish family moved to Chicago, and it is anti-Semitism that pulls the four characters together. Cindy, James, and Chris come to Aaron's rescue. An internal bond is formed between the four. And Aaron is exceptionally bright with a quick smile, and he has a father who's a Jewish rabbi. And he looks at his three new friends who saved him as his angels that God sent when he cried out to Yahweh. And therefore, Aaron's Angels was born, because Aaron refers to his three friends as the A-Team, because they are his team of angels. And, of course, just like in the book of Revelation, there's Jesus, archangels Michael and Gabriel. There's heaven and hell, Satan or Abaddon and his demons. They're all incorporated into the story and to many of the scenes. So without giving too much away about the book,
Right.
I'll stop there.
Mm-hmm.
I will mention that in book 2, it's the second generation who really becomes very central as it moves forward.
Gotcha. Well, it's almost time for us to go to break, so I want to make sure that everyone is able to pick up a copy of your book. So if you would, Kim, please, can you remind everyone where can they get a copy of your book and how can they follow you on social media?
Okay, well, first they can go to my website at www.klkministries.com, or you can just go on Amazon.com, type in author Ken Kelly. Facebook, it's facebook.com, KLK Ministries. And everything goes to Instagram as well, since Facebook bought Instagram. And I do have built a Facebook following, and I am going to be doing something on Facebook virtually every week. A little bit about the book, a little bit about answering questions about Revelation, etc.
Righty, listeners, you know where you can visit. We'll be back right after this.
Smell Good Spa for the women who are making a conscientious change in their personal care products. Specializing in signature fragrance oils, hand-dipped incense, and wholesome bath and body and personal care products. Smell Good Spa. Use code HELLO25 for 25% off your order. Live good, feel good, smell good wholesomely. SmellGoodSpa.com.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative. I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Discovery. Not just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer? Get us to open up? Even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is author Ken Kelly, and we are talking about his newest book, Aaron's Angels. You can find him online at klkministries.com. So, can you tell us, of course, without giving any spoilers away, perhaps we had someone that joined us a little bit later in the show. Can you remind us, what are your 3 books about, and what are their titles again? I want to make sure that everyone, okay, you guys write these down so you can make sure that you can get all 3 books.
Well, in book 1, Aaron's Angels, we'll see Cindy, James, Chris, and Aaron grow up from 15 years old to adulthood. And it's a lot of fun to watch them evolve and really get to know them. You learn what molds them into amazing adults who interact with the eventual Antichrist, who is filled by Abaddon. You'll also witness heaven and the interaction of archangels Michael and Gabriel, as well as Jesus and the Almighty. And you'll see how they deal with Abaddon and his demonic angels, as Abaddon tries to destroy the carpenter and his followers. I coined the term the carpenter because Abaddon, or Satan, just refers to him as the carpenter. So why didn't he come as a prince or a king where he could rule? He just came as a carpenter. So it makes it kind of, you see a different side of Abaddon, in a way, how it evolves, that Abaddon wants to usurp Christ, and why he believes he should. Now, the second book, The Rise of Abaddon, the reader will witness the first half, or the first 3.5 years of Revelation in the 21st century. Abaddon, which I mentioned, is Hebrew for, well, maybe I haven't, I don't know, but it's Hebrew for angel of death or destroyer. And he possesses Nephis Quietus. and Neff rises from diplomat to assume world dominance. So the question is, how can that happen? How can people in the free world really accept someone as a Messiah? You've got to read the book. And in the third book, Last Call, covers the second half of tribulation, the bowls of wrath, and Christ's second coming, and Armageddon, but also takes the reader through the millennium, the judgment, and the new eternal earth and heaven. So it's a complete study of all of Revelation, but in a very fun form.
So your trilogy covers the book of Revelation. How does that compare with the, or does it compare, maybe I shouldn't say how does it compare at all with the story that many people may be familiar with, and that's the story of Left Behind? Is your book anything like that series?
Well, it's kind of interesting that you ask. As I said earlier, I was called to write the book on Revelation, and I started to form it in 2001, and then I found the Left Behind series. So I began reading the series, and I decided that my calling must have been misinterpreted, because here was somebody writing about what I was thinking about doing. So actually, that's why I didn't begin my trilogy until 2007. But after reading the 16 books, I kind of realized that although I enjoyed the storyline, I didn't feel that I learned much about Revelation as a book of the Bible. Also felt that 16 books was a bit much. So after a few friends of mine who we get together and talk about Revelation, they studied as well, they kind of felt the same way. So I decided, okay, I guess my calling was real, so I better get to it. And as I've said, my trilogy is about how Revelation could play out in the 21st century. And how could a man rise to world dominance where people all over the globe would accept him as their Messiah? And what would happen to set the stage for such a thing to occur? I also incorporated angels, demons, heaven, and hell, just like Revelation does. And that also is different. So I really think it's. I certainly would never say anything bad about Left Behind. It was a wonderful series, but I think this is more of an updated, new concept of Revelation.
Well, I am just so excited that you were able to come on and share your, not only just this book, but a little about the other books that will be coming out as well. I love having authors on the show because it really, I think, inspires people to not only read more books, but to just kind of let their imaginations kind of broaden and take them to new places and have new experiences. So I would like to officially say thank you so much, Ken Kelly, for being a guest here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
And I thank you so much for the time.
And listeners, thank you as well for tuning in. And as always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, be blessed in the Lord. Bye.